speaking of reforms, the President of India has just given his assent to the amendments made to the Mines and Minerals Act. The aim is to ensure that iron ore supply, one of the aims is that to ensure that the iron ore supply does not get disrupted when the mines come up for auction in the month of March. Steelmakers should be happy. The move comes at a time when steel prices are also on the rise and volumes as well have shown some signs of pickup and may pick up. All this may paint a rosy picture for the sector that's influenced by a number of global factors as well. So should one start celebrating just yet, or are there some more measures that can be undertaken in order to smoothen the process even more? Joining us to talk about this is someone who took big decisions that influenced the sector's performance as Steel Secretary Mr. PK Misra, who held the ministry earlier, joins us right now from Delhi. Mr. Misra, good having you. Thanks so much for joining in. This is Neeraj here. Good morning. Are you happy with the changes that have been done in the very recent past, sir? And can they be a catalyst for minimal disruption for the steel makers?
Well, I feel that some of the measures taken by the government on the Mines and Minerals Act to facilitate iron ore supply are really welcome. And we do, I am firmly of the opinion that India can become a very major power in the steel business in the world. And I did say so when I was Steel Secretary, and I still believe so. I think we need to understand that India, with its vast population, vast geography, as it grows, is going to require far more infrastructure. Also, high quality infrastructure which requires steel. Besides this, car production is bound to go up, though there are, of course, right now some slippages. But I guess these kind of things happen in the course of development. And therefore, we must take steps to organize the steel sector in a much more scientific way, including producing high quality steel, which we still lack. Today, total steel consumption in the country is just about 60 kgs per capita. It should go up to 200 kgs per capita if we are to develop as a modern economy and reach the middle level income economies. So iron ore, of course, is very important. And what we need is really a long-term policy which is not tinkered with by either governments or the judicial system. And therefore, people can actually plan to invest money in iron ore mining, which will produce high-quality iron ore, beneficiation processes. Because even if the steel quality is not very good, China has shown that we can actually beneficiate a lot of the ores and make them far more useful for ourselves. So I think the long-term steady regime that is required on the regulatory side is very important for the growth of the steel industry. But I'm pretty sanguine that steel is going to really grow in the years to come, and we should prepare for it. We should not have to import. Right now, we are fortunately not importing till 2018, though of course some imports did happen before that, but very marginal. But my view is that we should actually be exporting something like 30 million tons of steel a year and bring in some valuable foreign exchange for India.
Well, and hope certainly pinned not just for steel but for the other pockets as well for that to happen. Mr. Misra, a conversation that goes on, and I would want your view here, a conversation that goes on is that Indian steel large caps are not quite going out and setting up capex, so the confidence around the cycle is not quite there. The one throwback at that is that because these companies are getting large capacities at the NCLT, they are in that fashion doing a bit of a capex on their own balance sheets because they are using that money to buy fresh additional capacities, and therefore they would not have the capital to anyways do fresh capex. What would your sense be? Is the lack of capex due to this NCLT issues alone, or is there still some lack of confidence about the pace at which the cycle can turn around?
I think it's mainly a question of mismatch of resources. I think people were very ambitious who set up the steel plants and didn't have the full resources to do it. Also, they didn't adopt the best technologies. And this is the reason why some of them actually failed. If you look at the total production of steel in the world, 50% is by China. We are something like 106 million tons. China is about 900 million tons. Now, with the size of India, its population and so forth, there is no doubt that demand is going to be there in the years to come. We need at least 300 to 400 million tons of steel. But at the same time, if you are not going to produce quality steel and you're not going to produce high value added steels and only going to produce raw steel and pig iron and so on, your profitability is bound to suffer. Now, people have been investing, industrialists have been investing basically in manufacturing raw steel and not giving enough attention to R&D to bring about quality improvements and achieve higher value added steel, which gives them a far more staying power because you make more profits and therefore you can expand faster, you can expand in I would say geometric terms, you can expand by about 20% per year capacity if you really want to do that, and you can export steel. So I think the cycle that we just witnessed, steel industry going through the NCLT process, many of the big steel plants suffered because of that, was because there was lack of resources. And also there was lack of application of resources in the right manner. So this is something that the steel industry in India should learn from and try to evolve into better quality steel makers.
Mr. Misra, do you in a way also believe that the steel industry, which is a feeder to industries such as infrastructure, the auto industry, that could also be a problem because both these industries are currently witnessing a slowdown, and therefore the demand itself is not as high as it would likely be?
Okay, so what is your question?
So what my question is that unless and until we don't see an on-ground pickup taking place in the infrastructure space, which again needs to be backed by the government, or we don't see a turnaround in consumer sentiment where they're ready to make big ticket purchases within the auto space. Auto manufacturers have taken production shutdowns, and therefore the demand could suffer for some more time.
Well, I'm not sure whether I've got your question, but I think, as I said, the steel demand is bound to grow, and we have to prepare to make better steels, better quality steels, and also to become net exporters in a big way because we have the natural resources. We have lots of iron ore of all qualities, some very high quality ore and some not so high quality ore. And also we have coal, though coking coal is what's required in steel. Now, we don't have so much of coking coal, but we do have some coking coal which can be actually refined, made better, and used more effectively for steel making. The rest would have to be imported. Well, a lot of countries do that and still make steel profitably, and because they produce high quality steel. Take Japan, for instance. They import everything, and yet they make, they're big steel makers in the world. We just, overtook Japan recently, and till now they were the second largest steel producers. Now we are the second largest in the world. But we have a long way to go, because if we have to run a big country like this, and the demand is bound to grow, and we still have to make a lot of infrastructure. We have to invest in capital goods. We have to invest in high quality housing and cars and so on. So the way forward, as it looks to me, is that we need to actually, perhaps the government can think of, providing some incentives for higher quality steel production so that the cycle kicks off.
Right.
And we have good quality steel in this country.
Right.
Also.
Which was my question, Mr. Misra. You spoke about infrastructure, you spoke about real estate. These are industries that use steel in a big way. So this economic slowdown or the downturn that we've been seeing, where much of the demand seems to be curtailed from all of these bigger industries which use steel, do you feel that this is just a short-term aberration? And like you said, I mean, you are on the road to seeing a demand pickup. Steel consumption is likely to go up. But for now, this economic slowdown, has it had a major impact on steel manufacturers?
Well, there was a big slowdown till about, I would say, 3 years ago. But now it's picking up. The prices have picked up. And as I see it going forward, steel should be growing faster. And in the last, about 10 years, it's grown at an average of about 4% per annum, the demand. But I think it should easily go up to 7, 8, 10% perhaps if the infrastructure growth picks up and so on, and the rest of the economy picks up. There is, of course, a high correlation between growth and steel requirements or steel consumption. So usually the elasticity is higher than 1, which means if you grow at about 8%, then you should be actually, there should be a growth of about 9 or 10% in steel production to maintain that growth. As to the general economy, I guess there will be a turnaround, and therefore steel production should also go up.
Just a couple of follow-up questions to the first answer that you gave, Mr. Misra, about you being hopeful, and I think a lot of other people are hopeful of the impact of these amendments that the government has done to have a positive impact. One of the things that still remains is the window for removal of mine infra, which according to brokerages at least who track this space, believe is a sticky issue because the existing merchant mine leaseholders have about 7 months to remove the existing mining infrastructure equipment or negotiate with the winning bidder, because at least people who track this space believe that this might be a tricky issue because it might cause a potential delay for the winners of the bids to get access to those mines. Small issue to tinker around and resolve, or do you think that something needs to be done about this at the quickest possible fashion?
Well, as I said, there are two things which are required for mining to really do well in this country and for long-term investments in mining. One is to have the regulatory regime a little more steady over time, whether it's the government or it's our system. Only then is it possible to really invest in, today our investment in mining, so far as underground mining is concerned, is very little. Most of the mining in coal as well as in iron ore is surface mining. But you do find very good quality down below, which requires, of course, much larger investments. And therefore, who would invest? Only a person who's sure that he has the rights to mine for a considerable period of time. Now, if you give 30-year leases for mining, maybe that's not enough incentive for deep earth mining. Maybe you need leases for a longer period for the investments required. So these are issues that the government should pay attention to.
Okay. So you reckon that the extension of the lease tenure could actually result in higher investments from the existing players into deep earth mining as well? Would it need to be accompanied by something else too, which if you had the chance to change, you would change?
No, I think just in extending the lease period to maybe 90 years, 99 years would be sufficient. And also, of course, as I said, I mean, there should be no flip-flops on policy. people should be aware that there will be a level playing field which is laid down for 100 years, so that they can make informed choices about investment. And then, of course, once you've got that in place, you need to give out the leases, for which you will have to have auctions. And I think then perhaps, today there's hardly any foreign investment in mining in India. Maybe some foreign investors would come and do some deep mining, who have the technology, who have the experience, and who have done it in their own countries. So I think just having a longer lease period should be sufficient.
Okay. Well, Mr. Misra, we appreciate your time this morning and giving us some of the insights with your experience onto this space and the recent developments. Thanks much for being with us today.
Thank you. Bye-bye.